All right, let's talk about H.L. Mencken. Now, he was a critic, sure, but he didn't just review culture. He went to war with it.
And this line, right here, it perfectly captures his style. He wasn't interested in some gentle academic analysis, no. He was there to deliver a verdict, and he did it loudly, confidently, and in a way you would absolutely never forget. For Mencken, this wasn't just criticism, it was combat.
So if Mencken was a fighter, you have to ask, who was he fighting against? Because he wasn't just shadowboxing, he had a very, very specific enemy in his sights.
And this was it, the genteel tradition. This was the cultural establishment that Mencken saw as his personal archenemy. Just think of literature that was super polite, always moralistic, and frankly, completely lifeless. You know, the kinds of novels where virtue is always rewarded and nothing ever challenges the status quo. It was a whole world of safe, approved art, and Mencken was absolutely determined to tear it all down.
So who was this guy? This champion, ready to take on the entire establishment? Well, he wasn't some academic, tucked away in a university. He was a newspaperman, forged in the fire of the daily deadline.
And that background, that time in the newsroom, it shaped his entire worldview. For him, the most honest writing was journalism. He valued clarity, speed, and raw, unfiltered contact with the real world. So in his eyes, academics were totally out of touch, and he thought most literary critics were just frauds. This whole foundation gave him the perfect set of tools for the fight that was coming.
You know, every great fighter needs their weapons. Well, Mencken fought with words, and his unique writing style wasn't just prose, it was a lethal arsenal, designed not just to be read, but to be felt. His writing is just so instantly recognizable. He systematically used these 4 devastating techniques. And these weren't just random quirks either. This was a calculated strategy, an arsenal designed to keep his readers, and especially his enemies, completely off balance. So let's break them down.
Okay, first up, he would mix high and low language. He'd drop a slang term he invented, like bourgeoisie, right into the middle of a formal, almost scholarly sentence. That clash, that was the whole point. It was just a brilliant way to deflate pretension and send a clear signal that he was not playing by the establishment's rules. Next, he loved to use hyperbole. I mean, wild, almost comical exaggeration. But it wasn't just for show. He was practically daring you, the reader, to look past all the fireworks and find the serious point he was making underneath all the noise.
And technique number 3? He'd play the scientist. He'd put on this lab coat of cold, detached language from biology or medicine to dissect what he saw as the sickness of American society. He treated popular ideas not as philosophies, but as pathologies, specimens to be examined under a microscope.
And finally, we get to the knockout blow. He would build these incredible, long, winding sentences. Sometimes they'd go on for a whole paragraph, full of complex clauses, just twisting and turning, drawing you deeper and deeper into his argument.
And then, bam, he'd drop a devastatingly short 2 or 3 word sentence that delivered the final judgment. The contrast was just so shocking, and the impact? Absolutely lethal. So, with this incredibly powerful arsenal of prose, Mencken stepped into the cultural arena. But he wasn't just tearing things down for the fun of it. He was also championing writers that the genteel establishment had completely ignored or dismissed. And this is where you really see his principles in action. While all the mainstream critics were clutching their pearls over authors like Theodore Dreiser, calling his work crude and immoral, Mencken saw something else entirely. He saw vitality, raw honesty, and a ton of genuine talent.
Dreiser's novels, you see, they showed this gritty, unglamorous side of America that the establishment just hated. But to Mencken, this wasn't vulgarity, it was truth. He knew Dreiser's work was essential, and he championed him against the critics for decades.
He also championed Sinclair Lewis, whose books like Main Street and Babbitt were these savage satires of American conformity and small-mindedness. I mean, Lewis and Mencken were just natural allies, like 2 generals fighting in the exact same war against cultural dullness. But here's the twist, because behind the loud provocateur, behind the literary brawler with the lethal prose, there was something else going on entirely. There was a serious, patient, and deeply knowledgeable scholar. And this one year, 1919, it reveals the 2 sides of Mencken just perfectly. In that single year, he published Prejudices, which was a collection of his most provocative cultural attacks. But he also published The American Language, a monumental work of scholarship that is still respected today.
And this, right here, is the central contradiction and the key to understanding Mencken. The popular image of this cultural bomb thrower was actually built on a solid foundation of rigorous, detailed scholarship. All those fireworks are powered by genuine learning. He knew exactly what he was talking about, and that's what made his attacks so devastatingly effective.
So when you peel back all the layers, this fighter, this scholar, this incredibly complex man, what did he ultimately believe in? What was the core philosophy that was fueling all the fireworks and all the fighting?
Well, when you boil it all down, his entire project was a war against herd thinking. He despised anything that demanded conformity, from Puritanism to prohibition to political demagogues. And on the other side, he championed the heroes of intellectual independence. Friedrich Nietzsche, what he called the natural aristocracy of talent, and above all else, the individual mind that refuses to just bow down to public opinion.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought. Mencken waged his war on approved mediocrity a whole century ago. But his central fight, the fight against intellectual laziness and conformity, well, it feels more relevant than ever. Which really makes you wonder, who's fighting that battle today?